And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge. I'm Anthony Irwin, Lakers insider for Lakers Daily. Joined on this show on this fine Wednesday evening by Jovan Buha. I've been meaning to do that. I keep forgetting every time you come on the show. Jovan, how you doing, bud?
I'm
Congratulations on
doing
getting married. What an off
Thank you.
season.
It's been quite the off season, but I'm doing well. I'm refreshed. It took a few weeks off to start September and back on the grind. It's been first 2 days of school vibes and things have been going well.
Jovan acquisitions won. Lakers acquisitions. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking on the show today. By the way, you guys know this. Jovan does a fantastic job covering the Lakers for The Athletic. My personal favorite beat reporter. He's just running up the score at this point. But he covers them for The Athletic, and then obviously also for his YouTube page and podcast, Buha's Block. Phenomenal content over there as well. So chances are you're already following him and already paying attention to his coverage. But if not, change that and subscribe to The Athletic. But yeah, today on the show we're going to be talking about Lakers camp, where the vibes actually seem like I'm obviously kind of down on this team heading into the season. I don't have very high hopes for how this is going to go. But it really kind of seems like the Lakers have kind of rallied around each other to a certain extent, like the actual players, and rallied around a certain former head coach's non-presence there. I think is how I'll probably put it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm curious how you have felt about the first couple of days of JJ Redick's tenure. He's thrown out some interesting concepts and some interesting quotes that has struck me kind of as first time coach getting really, really excited about some stuff and going out there and running with it. But yeah, just to start, like what's the vibe been like there at camp and from the moments that you can kind of see as practices are wrapping up and the DJ is playing?
Well, I said this yesterday on my show that to me, the vibes have been at an all-time high. Like this is now my fifth Lakers training camp, and I can't remember it having this type of energy and atmosphere. And part of it might be that they have a DJ now at practices and that they're mixing songs and stuff. And JJ said today that LeBron requested the DJ, but just walking in yesterday for the first time, it's one thing with media day. Everyone is in the best shape of their career. Everyone is working on their shot or their handle. Everyone's optimistic that they can win a championship, but you can't quite fake the vibe at a practice. And last year at times you could tell this was a moody team. This was a team where things felt a bit off. And that vibe changed later in the season, but ultimately in the playoffs, it kind of just was what it was. So I think going into this season, bringing back a lot of that same group, it has been a renewed energy and spirit and just vibe with this group. And I think a big part of it has been the things that you reported on, the things that I reported on last year in terms of a lack of organization and structure and preparation during both the regular season and the playoffs. Like that has been the exact opposite under JJ Redick. And they had a team meeting and a team dinner a few hours after media day to go over their identity and their values and their ground rules for the season. And then that allowed them to just go, first practice, go straight into those concepts and learning them and applying them rather than having to talk them through and walk them over and stuff. So I think JJ has been very time efficient in terms of how he's run his practices. A lot of focus on live scrimmaging and going over the different concepts in terms of spacing and their defensive principles and whatnot. So I just think that extra level of detail and structure and preparation has been in stark contrast to the way things were last season. And that was something that the players all wanted more of. So I think it feels like JJ's almost had the playbook of these are all the things that went wrong last year, and I'm going to do the opposite. And we'll see how long that lasts, but we'll see how sustainable that ultimately is. But so far, he's almost done everything by the book of like what Laker fans wanted. And I think, to that point, like it's just been, I think, pretty encouraging to start camp.
Yeah, it's interesting. it's one thing for, a nobody like me to report some of the stuff that I was reporting, but when you were writing the stuff that you were writing for The Athletic, to not have a single player like quote tweet The Athletics, various tweets are going out about like aggregating portions of your articles. At no point last year, really, did we get like even a player putting cap emojis on the things that we were reporting. And that really stood out to me, right? Like every time, you and I were talking over the course of the year, every time I would report something, you would report something, we would like hit publish or hit send to editor or whatever it was. And then just kind of brace for impact for how this is going to go over or who we're going to hear from and all of this stuff. And we never really heard from anybody. And then to take it a step further and to have the players basically rally around the notion of like, no, yeah, we like being coached. We like organization. We like the coach to appear prepared for at least training camp. Like we'll see how things go when he has to scout for various teams and you scout for the first team that you play and then you play a game right away the next night or something like that, and we'll see how JJ handles those situations. But I was also thinking about this, and I'm curious about, what you think the possibility of this might be. Sometimes when you have a team that is so widely doubted as this one is, right? That like had previous success. Now, I do think this is a worse roster this year than it was last year. I do think they're going to miss Taurean Prince in like a decent role, in a more realistic role. I do think they'll even miss Spencer Dinwiddie for some stretches, just depending on Gabe Vincent's availability. But, the consensus on the Lakers so far, like, it is really low outside of the play-in type of stuff or fighting for the play-in. And even if they make the play-in, they're probably going to be kind of roadkill for some team that is just better, more talented, more organized, whatever. And when you have a team that gets to rally around not having Darvin there and also rally around the notion of being legitimately doubted, right? Like we get like great teams that after they win a championship, they'll be like, nobody believed in us. It's like, you're the 73 win Warriors. Everybody believed in you. And this time though, the Lakers can legitimately say, and LeBron specifically can legitimately say for probably the first time in his career, nobody really believes in these Lakers. Do you think that might resonate with this team and be kind of a rallying cry from the get-go?
I think so. I think that's a really good point. And going back to last year, right? They were coming off of a Western Conference Finals appearance. So while I think a lot of experts didn't have them as high necessarily in the standings as maybe you would expect for a team that was coming off of a conference finals appearance, then also I think on paper had improved the roster, adding Gabe Vincent and Torian Prince. At least to me, it was like a net neutral, if not a slight positive. There's still, I think a lot of people had them in that like 4 to 7 range or so, depending on who it was. And I think like that's one thing, but this is you have ESPN had them 11th in their
Yeah.
projected standings. I've seen a lot of people tweeting out just different people I follow in the NBA space tweeting out their projected standings or playoffs, seedings, and the Lakers are often out of the playoffs and in some cases out of even the play-in. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are writing this team off and kind of forgetting that they closed the season 22-10 with Rui as a starter, 18-6 with this specific starting lineup. And I think as we both reported and discussed multiple times on our respective shows, like I think this was a group that left at least 3 to 5 wins on the table
Oh,
with some of the
absolutely.
rotational and lineup decisions that they made during the regular season. So, I think the one thing you can't predict is the health of the top of the roster. And last year, for as much as the Vando and Gabe injuries really affected them, LeBron, AD, Austin, and D'Lo were healthy. And if any of those 4 guys is not as healthy this upcoming season, I think that could have a significant impact on their record. But if those 4 can be relatively healthy and at least comparable to last season, I think this is a team that could win 50 games if JJ is pushing the right buttons. And so far, again, we only have a couple days to go off of, but so far it seems he is.
You can make a real argument that the team, like when the head coach walks into his first appearance with the team, you can make a real argument here that the team going into their relationship with JJ Redick is probably more bought in with him than either of the prior 2 coaches. You remember Frank famously was like the 4th option by the time they got to him. Darvin Ham, I remember there was a little bit of annoyance that Phil Handy, from some of the guys in the locker room, that Phil Handy didn't get a more serious look. In this case, this is JJ Redick. This is a guy that, even though LeBron has distanced himself from the hiring, and JJ Redick has done everything he can to make it seem as if LeBron didn't play any kind of a role here, but this is a LeBron hire. We can all kind of acknowledge that. And I really think that, like, that buy-in really matters with a team like this. That I would imagine, like, if you and I feel as if the Lakers left wins on the table last year, think how the hyper competitive super athletes feel about last year. And I bet, I saw that Vanderbilt, like, there's some clips going around about him kind of looking kind of down and out. I think that has a lot to do with how his foot feels. But for the most part, I would imagine all of these guys are really chomping at the bit to, like, no, we're better than we were last year, even if we lost a couple of these guys. And I think that's going to be interesting. But what do you think about the notion of, like, buy-in to JJ specifically?
I think that there's been a strong buy-in, and I think of Austin Reaves had a quote on Media Day where basically said, I forgot if he used organization or structure, but one of those two words. It was like, we've had a lot of organization, and last year we won a lot on our talent, and when you mix talent with organization, that's when you have the opportunity to do something special. So I took that as a shot at the previous regime for sure,
Yeah.
but I also took that as like that's been the a lot of players have had the same talking points, and I don't know if they're just doing a really good job of media training them of what to say. Like that's certainly within the realm of possibility, but I'm taking it as players are all saying the same things of organization, structure, discipline, preparation, and talking about just laying out clear concepts of this is the type of team we want to be offensively. This is the type of team we want to be defensively. I think it's been nice for the players to have a clear starting lineup. And it seems like there's going to be some competition for the bench spots, but we kind of know where this is trending. And to have that clarity within the rotation, within certain lineups already, I think that puts, because remember, starting training camp last year, like it was supposed to be a race between Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt. And then Vando gets injured in, I want to say it was the first or second preseason game.
Yeah.
And that just derails the start to his season. But then all of a sudden, like Torian Prince emerges out of nowhere. And there's just a lack of clarity with the beginning of the season in terms of the lineups and the rotations. And, Darvin wouldn't really speak on a lot of those things until they would release the starting lineup. So it was like, you just didn't really know. And JJ's come out and said, here are our starters. This is the group we're investing in. Like, we're going to go with 4 bench guys. Here are the guys in competition for it. And it's really a competition for that, like, 9th spot. And I think we kind of know it's probably going to be Gabe, Max, Jackson, and I would guess Dalton with Vando out. And then when Vando comes back, Dalton probably takes a step back and has a little bit of a smaller role. But even then, like, I just think JJ's communication and just effectively setting expectations has been a big thing for the players. And again, it's not like, it feels like this is basic coaching stuff, but in comparison to where things were at times last season, and just players not knowing, am I going to start? Am I going to play today? What's the game plan? Is the game plan going to change? Like this is a stark departure from that.
Yeah, my daughter just kind of poked her head in. It's like, sorry, kid. I'll come
Is she going to chime in on it?
She's like, she has. Look,
it's like organization, structure, discipline.
She has heard my unfiltered Darvin Ham takes, so I'm a little worried about, like, kids get you in trouble when they repeat certain things. So I'm, like, concerned. She is not touching the mic anytime soon because I'm concerned what she might say about the previous
Daddy
coach.
said.
But no, I think like that was always what fascinated me about the Darvin Ham experience. Here's my thing. I don't know why he took such a crazy step backwards. I don't know if he got overconfident because of how the first year went. I don't know what happened there with his falling out with the players. And it didn't really make much sense to me. But, like, on top of it all, and maybe most importantly, he's a former player. He knows what these guys expect and like what they, it's an 82 game season. You have to have a very regimented life to be able to make it through there and thrive in that kind of a setting. And if anybody would know that, it's a former player. And it really kind of seems like JJ does recognize that and does, kind of relate to that with the players in a way that for whatever reason. And I would love to hear Darvin speak about last year, because I just find myself searching for one, for answers on why this thing went as poorly as it did. But yeah, the
He needs to
notion
do
of
like a Shannon Sharp interview or
yeah, he
something
needs to
like
club
that,
Shay
and
Shay.
just kind of just unload it, just unload the clip, take
I
shots at both of us.
maybe it's like Patrick Beverly, like maybe he'll do like Pat Bev's show, because I guess he's already told Pat Bev that, like, off the court, because Pat, I guess, told that story on his show that, like, he saw Darvin, and Darvin admitted that, like, he wasn't as prepared as he needed to be in the year that Pat was with the Lakers. And I guess it got even worse in the second season. Absolutely insane. But no, I want to talk a little bit now about the actual concepts that JJ has talked about. It's one thing to, you know, Rob is very good at talking about culture and using these kind of tech bro slogans to try to, schmooze his way into, reliably speaking about culture. But it's another thing to execute it, right? And JJ, I think, has done a great job at, being very clear and transparent, actual legitimate and genuine transparency when it comes to his views on how he wants to see the Lakers play this year. I'll start with the 9-man rotation bit of it. I think it's a little slim. I'd be a little nervous about it. Seeing as the guy at the top of the roster is 40, and Anthony Davis, while he's, I think, more healthy than people kind of give him credit for, is still, he always takes a little while to get up every time he falls down and stuff like that. And then because this roster is so thin, I'd be nervous about kind of stretching some of the guys. I'm a little nervous about the 9-man rotation. How do you feel about it?
I was a bit surprised that he said 9. I thought it would be more like 10, 10 and a half,
Yeah.
because it feels like if you're going 9 realistically as things currently stand, I feel like it's probably Dalton Connect and Christian Wood as the two guys on the outside looking in that we thought might have roles. I forgot that until right before media day when I was doing some prep for each player. Like Jackson Hayes and JJ Redick played together in New Orleans for a year. JJ Redick was one of his veteran mentors, and they have a pre-existing relationship. And as we've seen with certain coaching staffs, like sometimes that could play a part. But I also think if you're looking at, like, when I was doing my depth charts a month, 2 months ago, I had Jackson as the backup center. I think Jackson is better than Christian. I think the Lakers played their best basketball in the second half of last season, and that was primarily with Jackson as the
Yeah.
backup. And then I also think if you're looking at the Lakers trying to run more of the offense through AD around the elbows or around the top of the arc, Jackson is actually, can do some of those things. He's obviously not Anthony Davis, but in terms of being more of a screen, a screener, a roller, I think he has an underrated passing game, especially for like a backup center who's not really a high usage guy. Like I think Jackson can make plays out of the short roll, and just as a roller, he's a vertical threat. So I think he kind of fits almost like you could kind of use him similar to AD in some ways. Whereas Christian, I see more as like that, just pick and pop big, stretch 5, stretch 4 if he's playing next to AD. So I think right now it's looking like, again, I would expect Gabe, Max, Vando, and Jackson to be the 4 guys who likely get those top 9 spots. But I'm with you. Like I think on the one hand, like it felt like at times the rotation was sometimes too big, and it was just randomness,
Chaotic.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of grasping at straws for the right combination. So I think JJ distilling it down to a 9-man rotation on one hand, like I understand it. I do think though, with especially LeBron and AD, and you wanting to be careful with their workload, maybe going with a little bit of, okay, it's going to be Christian and Jackson, or it's going to be, just kind of finding ways to get those guys breaks every now and then. And maybe it is playing Christian and Jackson together to kind of, you're not going to replace AD, but at least if you have 2 7-footers out there, you have some more size and length. So I would I mean, and maybe Dalton plays this into it being a 10-man rotation. Like maybe if Dalton's
Yeah.
a 40% 3-point shooter and Gabe bounces back, Vandal comes back, like maybe you kind of have to play 10 guys and then eventually trim it as you get closer to the playoffs. But I was a little surprised with the 9-man, but like I get it. I think 9 is probably better than 11. To me, the sweet spot's probably 10, but I think for now though, it kind of solves itself because no Christian, no Jared to start the season, and then I think you have a clear 9 there. And then if you really need some wing defense, you can go to Cam, but I suspect he won't really be playing much.
Yeah, I think usually, so it's one thing to say like a 9-man rotation. I think it's possible I might have taken it a little bit too firm in that it could be a 9.5 or it could be 9 to 10 versus a 10 to 11. And if it's a 9 to 10, then that makes perfect sense. And at that point, then you're just talking about semantics or the reading of a situation. Another, like, it's been kind of weird though, because vibes have seemed great. I'm with you, to the extent that I can be, and without being there in the building. The one thing that I keep on like kind of coming back to though is like things around D'Lo were really quiet. It took Dan having to ask JJ about D'Lo to finally get a D'Lo mention all offseason from Rob on multiple occasions, from JJ on multiple occasions. It took finally that kind of moment to, and obviously they've been trying to trade this guy for a calendar year, more than a calendar year, dating back to when he agreed to his contract. The little gap in between agreeing to it and actually signing it, they canvassed the league then to try to see if they could find a sign and trade partner. Couldn't. They tried to trade him back at the deadline, couldn't. And then the notion was that, like, and as far as I was told, he opted in, and within a matter of hours, they were trying to trade D'Lo this summer after he, it was leaked that he was going to opt in, and he finally made that decision. What kind of vibe are you sensing around D'Lo? He had that kind of come to Jesus moment in the press conference, but aside from that, it's been kind of this like awkward elephant in the corner that it's not a Russ situation. I don't think it's a Russell Westbrook situation because
No.
he's not nearly as combative, I think, as Russell Westbrook could be, but it's not either,
Yeah, I mean, I think I thought he showed a level of self-awareness and maturity with his apology, and I think you could obviously take a cynical viewpoint and say like, "I'll believe it when I see it," and let's see how long this type of perspective or attitude or mindset lasts into the season. Because it feels like even when D'Lo was traded back to the Lakers, he had kind of some of that vibe of like, this is a full circle moment, and I'm glad to be back in LA, and I've matured a lot. And like he said somewhat similar things, and then it quickly devolved in the playoffs, especially in that Denver series, and then once again last season closed the season strong, and then the Denver series. So I, and then yeah. I mean, I'm with you. Like I do believe there's an element of like let's like see how this plays out and really see. He's talking about ramping up on the defensive end again. And like, I go back to
why.
last preseason, he said he wanted to be the team's Derek White. And it felt like that lasted like a couple of preseason games in terms of his defensive effort. And then he kind of went back to being the guy that he's typically been on the defensive end. So I think like there is an element of that. But at the same time, it's like this has just kind of been an awkward situation because, as you've reported, I've reported, like they were trying to trade him after he opted in. They weren't able to do so. He didn't have. I mean, the reason he opted in was because there was no market for him.
Yeah.
Obviously, if there was a market, he would have opted out and signed a contract. So I think he's just been in a really weird spot where I do think that both Denver series have really hurt his perception league wide, just in terms of like him being the type of like championship caliber, or even just like high level playoff caliber piece, for a good team. And I think like until he really shows it in the playoffs against like a team of that caliber, I think that's going to kind of be held against him. So I think it's good. Like there's been some positive signs, and from all indications, like it seems like him and JJ have a good rapport. He's bought into what JJ has said, but at the same time, when you hear Austin Reaves is going to be on the ball more, I do wonder, like, who does that come at the
The expense of, yeah.
the expense of, in terms of, like, maybe it's a little bit of usage for LeBron and AD, but obviously you want LeBron and AD to have the ball as much as possible. So to me, I feel like it kind of comes at the expense potentially of D'Angelo Russell, and maybe he becomes more of like the 3.5 or fourth option on the team, and Austin elevates to being like the clear number three. Where last year it felt like the inverse, where it
Yeah.
was more so like D'Lo was the number three guy, Austin was like 3.5/4. So like if that's the case, how does D'Lo accept that role? How does he feel about that? Because in the past he's talked about wanting to have the ball a certain amount, and he's like a rhythm player, and when he's not just a shooter, and like, so there's a lot of different ways that this can play out. But I mean, I think he deserves credit. Especially from my end, like I have been critical of D'Lo at times, but when he said the comments he made, I thought like he deserved props for owning up to being not very professional at times last season, and for not coming off having a team first attitude. But it's also like actions speak louder than words, and we have to see that actually apply in the games during the season. And if that's the case, then I think maybe we're having a different conversation with him.
I think, to be completely fair to D'Lo, I think he's going through something that a lot of NBA players are going through in this new CBA, where those like late 20s, veteran type players who are no longer kind of improving, and nobody or no longer can be kind of counted on to take strides forward in his career, as a development and all that stuff. Um, like those types of players, like their market completely dried up this year, and I think it's really difficult. Like it'd be very easy for him to hold it specifically against the Lakers. But they did what they gave him the player option. They gave him the golden parachute just in case his market did kind of dry up. So his frustration, normally frustrations go out on the person closest to you or the entity closest to you, but his frustration really should be aimed at the league, right? In this new CBA where teams just don't want to spend money on mid-tier players. That middle class of the NBA economy has basically kind of been swallowed up, and teams are willing to supermax guys to where they're making 60 whatever $1 million a year, and they're willing obviously to sign new younger players to these longer deals on at less money, the kind of deal that like Max Christie signed. But there just isn't very much of a market for those players in between, and it has led to the spot that D'Angelo Russell found himself in during the summer. And then you compound that with the team is trying to trade you again, not just in terms of like they're trying, he's dealing with the rumor cycle from this latest, turn around the bend with the Lakers, but they literally traded him before and now they're trying to do it again. So it's just, I think it's a really tough situation. I agree with you that he actually deserves some credit for the way that he's handled it for the most part, because there are a lot of players, i.e. Russ, who would not have handled it or, did not handle it as well. And,
Russ is still doubling down on the I have a unique skill set. I haven't been used right. Like it's
Mike Malone is the first coach to think of using him, like letting him use his speed. Michael Malone he cracked the code. But yeah, I do think that this is a tough situation, and it makes me kind of wonder. At the beginning of last year, the Lakers were willing to hand the reins over to Austin. They were hoping that he would kind of take over as point guard, and he did try to spend a little bit more time at the beginning of the year. And it was kind of different because he was coming off of the summer in which he played for FIBA or in the FIBA tournament, and he just didn't look quite right in general by the time the season rolled around. So maybe him being fresher, he's able to handle that situation a little bit better. But eventually, when after Darvin for some reason benched both of them, they brought him back, and then D'Angelo Russell does kind of assume more of the on-ball responsibilities. So it might be that they try Austin out in that role. He still isn't quite ready for it. There are a lot of people who I really respect who don't think that is the kind of role that Austin should be in. He's better off kind of attacking closeouts and operating as a floor spacer and stuff. Maybe if Austin isn't quite ready, D'Lo slips back into that kind of a role, and everybody just kind of fits into the offense that way. What do you think about that possibility, or do you think it's kind of difficult to if you do that, it makes it that much more difficult to trade D'Angelo Russell, because once again, you're really relying on this guy as a huge part of your offense, not just as a deep threat, but as an engine. Do you think that's a possibility? Is that something that the Lakers are willing to kind of entertain?
I think it's a possibility, but I do expect it to be similar to the start of last season, where the Lakers try to ramp up Austin's usage and his offensive role. Because I think this kind of goes back to, in some ways, the beginning of last season, where it was like, Austin did struggle to start the season in terms of his shooting and his defense, and he was just not playing to the level that everyone expected of him. Entering the season, like 2 months before the season at Summer League, Darvin Ham is on Sirius XM NBA radio interview saying that he thinks Austin Reaves has all-star potential, and sooner than later, potentially in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And then 9 games into the regular season, he benches him for Cam Reddish. So like that just never made sense to me. And since and I've since reported this, I know you've reported it as well, but like part of the fear with the group was, are we going to lose D'Lo if we move D'Lo to the bench and we keep Austin in the starting lineup? Like, how does that affect D'Lo and his psyche? So I think now that he's essentially an expiring contract, last year he had the player option, so could have been an expiring sort of, but like there was still some chance that he could be back. Like now that he's officially an expiring contract, I think they're probably going to take a more pragmatic approach of just like, Austin's the guy that's under contract for another 2 years, and this is a guy that we view as like a longer term piece. So we're going to prioritize him and his feelings, and because I don't think Austin was happy about being benched. Like he's a team player, and he went along with it, but like this was a dude who was coming off a new big contract, certain expectation, certain role, and then he's now all of a sudden playing 24 minutes a night coming off the bench and not closing sometimes. So it was like it just didn't really align with what the Lakers' vision was for Austin. So I think entering this season, there's a resetting of sorts, and it is kind of, to me, felt like Austin has replaced D'Lo as the number 3 guy in at least the coaching staff's eyes. And now what that looks like, I'm sure there'll be some units where it's like D'Lo and AD, and D'Lo's getting to run the show, and D'Lo's getting to do his thing, and those lineups can be very effective. But I think at least to start, it's probably going to be a bit more of a shift of, okay, Austin's probably more of the on-ball guy. Because again, to your point earlier, like we've only really heard about Austin during the off season, during media day stuff with Rob and JJ, and like there just has not been much D'Lo buzz or talk. And it doesn't mean he's not. I think he's going to be involved. Like the Lakers need D'Lo, right? Like make no mistake about it. D'Lo is going to play an important role as long as he's a Laker. But I think there is going to be a slight shift to empowering Austin, and likely D'Lo taking a slight step back.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. The other concept that he's mentioned to this point a ton has been focusing on offensive rebounding, and there's a ton of analytics behind it. There's a ton of discussion behind why this makes sense. The Lakers last year kind of ditched offensive rebounding in the hopes of getting back on defense. They sucked at both. Which
hard to do. Really hard to do.
Crazy. Yeah. So this year, I think the focus is to, crash from the corner, force a defender to stay on the baseline there and get in the way of whoever is crashing from the corner there. That in theory slows down the team running on the opposite end. One part of that though is that, you're kind of sort of if you're crashing from the corner, and AD is also crashing the offensive rebounding, that puts your transition defense in some tough spots. AD was asked, this was an interesting clip that I saw. This is from Daniel Starkin of Lakers Nation. This is Anthony Davis being asked about analytics and his response to it, which I found really interesting and a little longer than it needed to be. So we'll see what you guys think.
In the NBA, there's data for everything now. How much of that information did you find? JJ is certainly interested in it. Do you want it? Do you want numbers given to you about load, about expected shot percentages and different things like that? Or
I already know what some of that stuff means. It doesn't matter. What matters is we have more points than the other team at the end of the game. That's all I care about. These things, that they come up with as far as analytics, these categories and stuff like that, it doesn't even matter. It has no importance to me, whatsoever.
What about just like
Yeah. I care about numbers. Numbers are anything. You average 50 and you get last place, what do you got this season? Or you get 50, you average 50? Get nothing for that. So,
Averaging 50 and staying in last place would be quite the accomplishment. That would be pretty tough. That would be pretty insane. It would be one thing, honestly, like his face as Dan was asking his question, and honestly, like credit to Dan to continue asking the question while AD's looking at him like, we're going, like we're still okay.
That was a very memeable face.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not going to read too deep into it. A lot of NBA players, like this is probably closer to the way that the majority of NBA players feel about analytics. You have like the Shane Battiers of the world, and you have the Kevin Durant's of the world who really believe in this stuff and really focus on their efficiencies on whatever end of the court matters most to them. But then for the most part, it's on the coaching staff really to instill into their players the importance of a particular stat and why we're succeeding because of how well we're doing in this, regard or whatever regard. What did you, I know you weren't there for that moment, but like, what do you make of that clip? It seemed like 30 seconds too long.
Yeah. So I was not. I was at practice, but I wasn't in the scrum because I was interviewing someone else for a story that I'm working on. So I only saw that clip and then the full transcript of 80's practice availability, and I was a little surprised, I'll say, with the attitude behind that. Now I will say, like specifically with the two examples that were brought up, player workload and then like shot expectant or shot efficiency expected or whatever. I don't think like a lot of players do care about that stuff. Like the workload stuff, I know some of it, sometimes it's like color coded of just like red, yellow, green. Green's obviously good. Yellow is like, okay, you got to be a little careful. Red is bad.
So Davis has been like blood red on defense the whole time he's been a Laker.
Well, yeah, but so I think like because JJ had brought up how they're tracking all this stuff with the players and they're really trying to manage each player's individual workload during the preseason, and that Bronny had ran 6 miles and in the first day of camp, and JHS had ran 5.5, and those were like the top 2 guys in terms of total distance ran. So I think that type of stuff, like players probably aren't going to be as invested in. Like some players will be, and then looking at like shot expectancy, that is another thing where like if you're AD, like you're just kind of like, I'm going to shoot the shots I'm going to shoot. Like I've been a superstar for over a decade in the NBA. I'm not changing my shot profile because analytics say to do this, which as we know, analytics aren't saying to do this, but that's just how people interpret it. So like the two examples used, I was not surprised that he kind of responded that way, but obviously could be taken as like a slight or him not necessarily fully buying in to what JJ is saying, because I thought Austin Reaves had a perfect answer to it, where he was like, I often go off of feel and flow with the game, and that's how I've often played, and I take a lot of mid-range shots, which are the least efficient shot according to analytics, but I am open-minded to JJ sharing this information with me. I'm trying to kind of expand the way I look at the game and ingest all this new information and just kind of just sort of look at things differently. So I felt like that was even if you don't buy that, even if it's all lip service, like that stuff can matter when you're talking to the media and fans are consuming this stuff. So I thought AD's answer was interesting, but to me, I just took it honestly as like he just doesn't like analytics, and some guys just don't fully understand it, or they do understand it and they still just they think it's just kind of another thing to detract from their game. So I guess like that's like a great insight into it necessarily, but I felt it more said about AD's opinion about analytics than his opinion about like JJ or the coaching staff. Because earlier in the press conference, he did compliment JJ and the preparation and the thoroughness of everything, and that they've had a really good 2 first days of camp. And I feel like he's already talked a little bit differently about JJ than he did about Darvin.
Yeah, that was great. AD is not the kind of guy to throw shade at coaches and stuff like that. So when AD was finally throwing shade at Darvin, I was like, oh man, this guy's in trouble. You know, like
I think that was the nail in the coffin.
Super competitive guy. Obviously, really cares about defense and stuff like that. But he does kind of go along with the flow. And when he was finally out there saying like, we have the same scouting report every game, of course, like I feel that feels kind of lacking. I was like, oh my god. This is
it was the death knell.
Final thing before we get out of here, anything in particular that you kind of headed into camp looking for and will be looking for in these preseason games, whether it be on the sideline with how JJ handled this is the first time we'll see JJ on the sideline, whether it be with the types of things that we see strategically or culturally with the team. What are you kind of looking for heading into, the Lakers will be playing a game here in a matter of a couple days or so?
So 2 things for me, and I think that they're both pretty straightforward. One is going to be the rotation and how much of the way we expect the rotation to go versus the way it actually goes. Like how closely aligned are those 2 things? Because Jalen Hood-Schifino got some buzz yesterday as one of the 2 standout guys alongside Max Christie. Now, if you go back to last training camp, Jalen Hood-Schifino also got some buzz from Darvin Ham, and then once we saw him in the preseason and
early
regular
October
season,
All-Star.
That did not materialize whatsoever. So, JHS we didn't even see in summer league because of his back surgery. So we'll be interested. Like that's probably the guy I'm most interested in just seeing how JHS looks. And is there can he play his way? Because by pedigree, at least being the number 17 pick in last year's draft, theoretically he should have a shot to at least play his way into a rotation spot. Now, based on what we saw last summer league and what we saw in the regular season and with the parent team, that's not the case. And I have some doubts about JHS doing that. But if he comes out, that's the guy I want to see the most. Obviously, Max Christie is another guy where we're expecting a leap from him. And if he plays a larger role and just a more consistent role, what does that look like? So I think on the one side it's the rotation, and then the other side it's just schematics. And JJ's talked a lot about shooting more threes, and they're revamping the offense. We saw a clip today of LeBron, around the free throw line, playing out of the triple threat position and getting, pivoting and driving and having a dump off pass to AD for a dunk, and doing some more stuff like that with LeBron and AD operating around the elbows at the top of the arc. I think seeing Austin Reaves roll, and then defensively, that balance of if you're crashing the offensive glass more, that does make you more susceptible in terms of your transition defense. And JJ said today they had a transition drill that was basically a glorified conditioning drill. And I'm interested to see that push-pull of as you said, they're bad in both areas, which is really hard to do. But if you're going to improve in one, there's a chance, it's hard to improve in both. So, and you typically pick one or the other. It's either you want to be a good transition team or a good offensive rebounding team, but your transition is going to take a hit. So, how do they balance that? And then defensively, JJ's talked about using the bigs in a different way in terms of like last year was a lot of all our bigs are in drop. It doesn't really matter who we're playing. It doesn't matter which big it is, but we're going to play drop defense. So is he using Jackson Hayes as more of a switchable mobile big? Is he using AD as a Swiss Army knife to kind of put out fires and really leveraging his ability? And then with Christian Wood, probably a little bit more of a drop big, but it really depends on the matchup. So those types of things I think I'm fascinated by, of how much can the Lakers actually apply in a preseason game. So for me, again, it's the rotation. What does that look like? Does anybody pop? And then it's also the schematics of JJ's talked a lot about different changes and how realistic is some of that, at least with the first preseason game.
Yeah, I'm actually excited to see all of this stuff in practice. It's I'm happy to finally be talking about basketball is how I'll put it, because it was a frustrating offseason, right? You covered it as well as anybody could. however many people asked you in your mentions or emails or YouTube comments, hey, are they going to do anything? Are they going to do anything? And like, it was almost demoralizing to us to have to keep on saying, no, it doesn't look like they're going to. This is the team. This is the team. But now this is the team. And now they are going to, now they do get this opportunity to actually rally around the doubt that they're facing and rally around JJ not being Darvin Ham and all of those things. And I'm looking forward to watching it. But a reminder, everybody, please do check out all of Jovan's stuff at The Athletic on YouTube. His podcast is fantastic as well. Anything specific that you want to plug before we get you out of here?
No, just as you just said, check out my work on The Athletic. Check out both my YouTube channel and my podcast, Buha's Block. And stay tuned for. I think it's going to be a fun weekend and just a crazy season as always. Anytime you're covering the Lakers.
Absolutely. All right. That is going to do it here for this episode of the Lakers Lounge. Please do hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your friends that you love the show, tell your enemies that you hate it. Have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you tomorrow.